or Katrina. Rob, okay.
I'll fire up a live stream.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We'll wait till your cue there, Rob, and then we'll get going.
Sure.
Any Irish on here? Any St. Patty's guys on here? St. Patty's Day's coming.
Even he is Irish. His story is it was O'Keeveney and they dropped the O in the ocean when they came across from Ireland.
I see. They say sometimes with McQueen, it's McQueen or McQueen, just depending whether you're Scottish or Irish.
There you go.
Pretty sure I'll qualify.
I'm pretty sure.
There you go.
All right, Mr. Chair, we are ready when you are.
Okay. Well, thanks, Rob. And we'll call this meeting to order for our Affordable Housing Task Force meeting of March 3rd at 10:30 a.m. So we have an agenda, a published agenda in front of us. And to the committee members, is there any declaration of interest to committee members? All right. So one does arise. So then moving forward, we have a report here, addendum to PDRAF-01-20, an update housing action plan and next steps. So I'm presuming either Madam CAO or Anne Marie or all staff will be taking a part of this. So I'll pass it over to whoever would like to go through this report.
Thank you, Chair McQueen, and I'll kick it off. And Anne Marie and I think are going to tag team it, and of course, we're all here to help answer any questions with respect to the housing action plan. So I'm just going to share my screen here, or attempt to. Okay.
Yes, we do. I'm sorry, Chair McQueen. We do need the motion moved and seconded before we can talk about it.
Very important. So now it's on the.
I do see Councillor Burley. His
Okay.
hand is up.
Councillor Burley, do we have a seconder?
Councillor O'Leary.
O'Leary. Okay, sorry. Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
So there we are. Thank you for that.
Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Looks good, Randy.
Excellent. So good morning. Staff have developed this report to provide an update on the strategic initiatives that are either underway or under development to address affordable housing, as well as attainable housing, and to present an updated housing action plan. So this presentation provides just a summary of the information that's contained in the staff report that's attached to the agenda. And we want to talk about the current housing situation in Grey County. We'll highlight some of the housing initiatives underway, and we'll highlight some of the future actions and next steps which are identified in the updated housing action plan attached as an appendix to the report. So the Affordable Housing Task Force commenced exactly a year ago today, actually, which is interesting. A report was presented at that first meeting, which outlined housing options and potential program opportunities for helping to create more affordable and attainable housing. And throughout the past year, of course, the task force has analyzed data to better understand the overall need for affordable housing. Some of the data reviewed is provided through links at the end of the staff report there. And the data clearly shows, as we've discussed with the task force, the need for both affordable and attainable housing throughout the county. Average housing prices continue to be at an all-time high. The rental housing vacancy rates remain low. Although the Affordable Housing Task Force focused on actions and initiatives to provide affordable housing for residents most in need, which are residential households earning less than $30,000 a year, there are a number of action items and incentive programs that will also help to address some of the attainable housing needs, or often what we call the missing middle housing. And these are typically household income between $30,000 to $100,000 per year. And we'll describe some of those initiatives and actions that obviously focus is on affordable housing, but we think will also help to address some of the attainable housing needs as well. So this slide, I'll turn over to Anne Marie just to talk about the Affordable Housing Fund.
Good morning, Council. Affordable Housing Fund, very excited that Council did approve the creation of an Affordable Housing Fund and some annual funds to support that. The funds will be used to look at future housing builds, rent supplements, any other strategies that might allow us to move forward with supporting our households in great need. The funds will have an impact in addressing our wait list, which is great because the funds will be available to between a combination of affordable housing and rent supplements. We can offer people a unit that they may only, that will allow them to pay only 30% of their income. This fund can be used to leverage additional funding or grants. Right now, we don't have numbers from the province as to what those funds will be for next year, but we do know that there will be some funds coming through the affordable housing, provincial and federal funds. Normally, we get a 3-year allocation, which is great. It allows us to do some planning. So we're hoping to hear within the next couple of months from the province what those allocations will be for 2022, 23, and 24. Without those numbers right now, it does limit the planning we can do for affordable builds. But certainly, as soon as we get those numbers, we'll be able to look at what we can provide for some of our nonprofits that are anxious to get building. We can also reinvest funds from divestiture of some of our county property. We do have 2 units right now that we're looking at divesting. A few years ago, actually, I did go to council with a report looking at some of our single homes that may require a bit of capital to come, or that we know that we could look at doing something better with energy efficiency and whatnot. So we do have 2 units that I will be bringing to council, committee of the whole, for approval to divest in the next few months. So that whatever we do get from the property will be added to our affordable housing affordable housing fund. And then nonprofit mortgage payment savings. So we do have some of our nonprofits in which their mortgages are coming to an end in the next few years. We do have to enter into a different agreement. The agreement that we have with our nonprofits right now is based on funding that we provide for operating and for mortgage payments. So there will be some savings there. We also note that there will be some needs in capital funding that will need to be addressed in some of our nonprofits too for that future capital. The province is working, there's a working group, and there is opportunity as service manager ourselves. I do sit on the group to make some recommendations to the province as to what that would look like. So we are hoping, though, that there would be some savings that could be directed towards the Affordable Housing Fund. It's not our intention that we would lose any of the funding that we're currently putting into housing. And most affordable housing builds, as Randy mentioned, will probably be a mixture of affordable and attainable, varying levels of rent in order to make it a viable project. So even though we might be looking at focusing in on affordable housing, there certainly will be some missing middle market rents too. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that slide.
Okay, maybe I'll stop there for a minute. Is there any questions up to this point from committee members? I don't hear anybody. Okay, Anne-Marie, maybe just continue on then.
Okay. I'll take some of the next couple of slides and then turn it back over to Anne-Marie to talk about kind of the future action items and next steps. So another action item supported by the task force is to establish a land bank to support future affordable and attainable housing builds. Lands that are currently owned by the county, local municipalities, or the province are being explored first. So these are considered kind of the low-hanging fruit, as lands are already publicly owned. This helps to support the county's housing first policy, whereby any surplus land that the county owns must first be considered for affordable housing where it's deemed to be suitable. So staff are currently in the process of developing criteria to assess the suitability of sites, including properties within settlement areas, sites that can be readily serviced or shovel-ready sites, sites in close proximity to schools and hospitals and medical clinics and other public facilities that the residents of those housing builds will be able to access and utilize more readily. So county staff will work with local municipal staff on developing that preferred site criteria and to then start identifying preferred sites. If the lands are not shovel ready, we will work towards getting them shovel ready by pre-zoning the lands to support housing builds. In cases where there are not enough publicly owned lands within some of our settlement areas, there may be a need to purchase lands using the Affordable Housing Fund to support future builds, as Anne-Marie noted. Lands within the Housing Land Bank will then be offered to either nonprofit housing organizations first or to private developers through a request for proposal type process. And the RFP can set out certain conditions that the county and the municipality would like to see built within those housing builds, including minimum affordable housing targets, ensuring that rents remain affordable for a period of time. Usually 20 years is what we look to achieve at minimum, and ensuring that these requirements will be established through an agreement. This would be similar to the process that we completed for the lands in Durham that resulted in the construction of a 15-unit apartment building with 11 affordable units and 4 attainable units. And that image of that build is on the screen. Another incentive to help encourage more affordable and attainable housing is the Community Improvement Plan program. And this was approved by Council in 2019. And the CIP enables municipalities to offer incentives such as surplus land grants, tax increment equivalent grants, reducing or exempting application fees, as well as a number of other incentives to encourage certain types of developments, including affordable and attainable housing. Most local municipalities have either approved or are in the process of approving a new CIP using that template. And the table on the screen here shows the municipalities who have completed the CIP, which includes 6 local municipalities to date. And the other 3 municipalities will be completing their CIP this year. So by the end of this year, we will have all 9 municipalities with a CIP that links with the county CIP program, that will be able to offer incentives throughout the county to encourage affordable and attainable housing, as well as other developments that council is looking to encourage. The next steps are to work with the municipalities to promote these incentive programs through brochures, websites, social media, through pre-submission consultation meetings with developers, etc. And we will also work with municipal staff to monitor the progress of the CIP program, to share success stories and to make any adjustments to the program to make sure that's as effective as possible.
So Randy, I have a question pop up.
Sure.
So Councilor O'Leary, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Randy, just back to the land bank.
Yeah.
Do we have an actual list that's started already, or like you're talking about developing one, but do you have a list that started?
Yeah, we do. So we've created some mapping showing what is publicly owned lands throughout the municipalities and throughout the key settlement areas throughout the county. We've shared that with local municipal staff as kind of a first kind of crack, but we want to, like I said, mentioned, develop a criteria to assess the suitability of some of those sites. Some sites will obviously be more suitable than others. And those are so we're trying to, I guess, pick the low-hanging fruit of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, to see where we should try to focus our efforts to really support affordable housing builds, especially if they're close to those facilities, as I mentioned, things like schools, hospitals, and clinics, and other things like that. We think those are the ones that maybe we should target first. There are other properties I think that would also be eligible or available down the road, but there's some that we think that are more preferable than maybe some other sites, and we'll work with local municipalities to figure out what those preferred sites look like, and then, like I said, get them shovel ready so that we can offer them through an RFP process.
So Randy, would that be something that would come back once you've done that work to this committee with regards to a bit of a map of showing where those are, or is that something?
Yeah, and that's where we want to have some discussions in terms of next steps. We want to keep this task force going and be able to provide some kind of progress updates in terms of where we're at with the action items with the housing action plan. And so that would be one example of a update in terms of where we're at with those, the land bank, identifying some of those preferred sites that we think will work. And then again, working with those municipalities to get those shovel ready as shovel ready as we can before we offer them up through an RFP process.
Thanks, Randy. Councillor Leary, do you have a follow-up to that?
No, that's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. And so you're looking at what, a 6-month turnaround for something like that, Randy, like to gather that information?
Yeah, so we're probably in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll have a better sense and be able to provide some further updates to the task force. So we're thinking that's probably when we'll re-engage the task force to say in 3 to 6 months time, we'll have hopefully a number of these action items well underway. And there's some that already are underway, but we'll have some further updates to provide to the task force within that period of time.
And by that time, we'll have that plan back from the Durham land as well, right?
Exactly. Yep, which I'll highlight as well.
Are there any other questions at this point from anybody? Okay, carry on, Randy, then.
Great. So the next slide we have here, and I'm just sure I go, here we go. So in January of this year, County Council approved changes to the development charges bylaws. This will help to encourage more rental housing, nonprofit housing, and additional dwelling units by exempting these developments from a county development charge. There were other changes made to the DC bylaws, including supporting incentives related to the CIP program that I just highlighted, as well as considering development charge credits for conversion of, for example, commercial buildings to residential uses. County Council also approved the deferral and conditional exemption policy in January of this year. And that implements and provides further details regarding the deferrals and conditional exemptions. In addition to the development charge exemptions, the policy also outlines when the county would consider deferral of development charges. And this is beyond the deferrals that are required under the Development Charges Act. And those developments include housing that meets the Accessibility for Ontarian Disabilities Act, other rental developments not eligible for a conditional exemption, as well as new condominium apartments or life land lease developments. So these developments would qualify for a deferral and only pay the DCs at time of occupancy of the first unit. So again, this helps to reduce the upfront capital cost for development by deferring those to a later date, allowing them to focus those charges, apply them to their actual construction costs, and then start recouping costs when they start occupying those units, and then be able to pay those development charges at that time. The development charge exemptions and deferrals are just an additional incentive, as I mentioned, that will help to encourage more affordable and attainable housing. It will help nonprofit housing providers and developers reduce their overall development costs, which could make a rental project more viable. It may also allow developers and homeowners to proceed with those projects earlier than what they had originally planned. It would also free up capital costs, which we're hoping that could be invested in more rental housing builds. And by having more rental housing options throughout the county, some people may be able to sell their existing homes, move into those rental units to either downsize or to free up equity in their house. This in turn would then free up more housing supply options for others to then enter into the housing market. In terms of the
Chair, I'm sorry. I do see Councillor Keaveney has a question.
Go ahead.
Thanks very much, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Randy or to Anne Marie. I have a couple of questions, but I'll just ask one now. Going back a couple of slides, it occurred to me that I would inquire as to whether this group felt we had a role in, I'll say, educating neighbors of these particular projects, recognizing that there is sometimes a level of discomfort in folks living around these projects, and how we can work towards helping people accept and understand how necessary these builds are. And just as a task force, really what our job is in helping to provide that education and building that comfort level.
Thanks for the question, Shirley. Randy or Anne Marie?
I can certainly help out a little bit with some of the builds that we have done in the past. We certainly work with the nonprofit or whoever might be building to have them engage with neighbors that might be concerned. Sometimes it is just a matter of meeting with those neighbors, having a public meeting and talking about what is going to be built, showing the site plan. So the more information you can provide some of the neighbors, the better. And that has been successful in the past with the majority of the builds that we have done. It's just in that involvement, that giving that information. There's always going to be some that won't accept what that is, but I think the majority of them that come to the meeting feel better when they leave about what is being built.
Great, thank you for that. Any
Further
follow-up
to
to that, Shirley? Randy, go ahead.
Just further to that, and you know, one of the actions for sure is to be able to promote and educate on the need for and the importance of affordable and attainable housing, just to remove that negative stigma that is often attached to higher density housing or housing that is not single detached homes. So this is something that, you know, through the Housing for All webpage and some other video content and other things that we've been working on, trying to promote those more, sharing those through our local municipal channels, sharing them with others. And maybe it's like a combination of, when we're, like Anne Marie said, when we're doing these builds, being able to point to some of this information just to share why we're doing these builds and why they're so important. They're for our overall community health. So that is, I think, for sure something that we're recommending, and I think is for sure been supported previously by this task force, is something that's very important to make sure that we're continuing to promote and educate on the importance of the housing that this task force is trying to create.
Great. Thank you for that, Randy. Any other questions up until now? Okay, carry on.
Excellent. So the next slide is around the importance of keeping our official plan and zoning bylaws up to date to create those favorable development conditions for affordable housing and other housing types that maybe traditionally we haven't experienced in the past. Recolor Gray was approved by the province in June 2019, and it provides a number of policies that support a wide variety of housing types and densities to be built. As our communities continue to grow and evolve, however, the county and member municipalities will just need to ensure that our planning evolves as well, and to update our planning documents to support these new housing trends, such as co-housing, supporting additional dwelling units, whatever trends are happening, to be able to help, again, address the affordable and attainable housing shortages that we have. Residential neighborhoods also may continue to change, as will downtowns, and opportunities to explore residential infill developments in or near downtown should be promoted. And that Living on Main Street study that was completed by the University of Toronto master's students, they provide some recommendations that the county and the local municipalities can consider when updating our planning documents. We are planning to do a housekeeping amendment in 2021. So that is an opportunity for us to review our current housing policies, and as well as to include policies to support different forms of housing, such as co-housing options, etc. So as part of that update, we'll be able to come back to this task force with maybe some draft recommendations in terms of policies again, to support these overall housing forms. Further policies that support the creation of additional dwelling units can also be considered as part of that housekeeping amendment. We will also continue to work with our member municipalities to update their zoning bylaws and official plans. Again, just to make sure that we're creating that favorable development conditions at the community level to support housing. Most municipalities have updated their official plans and zoning bylaws to support things like secondary suites, or what we call now additional dwelling units, as well as removing minimum residential unit sizes from their zoning bylaws. There are other changes that can be considered, including unit densities and parking standards. These all have an impact on the overall housing price. So it's an opportunity when we're reviewing these official plans and zoning to take a look at it through a housing lens in this case, to make sure that we're, again, creating that favorable development environment. Pre-zoning lands identified as part of that housing land bank, as we talked about earlier, or where a municipality even wants to encourage a higher form of housing density, such as where permitting apartments, will also be important when zoning bylaws are being updated. Because if you pre-zone those lands, typically then what's only required is a site plan application, which in most cases is a fairly quick process. So again, being able to, from a timing perspective, because time is money, if we're able to pre-zone these lands, get them more shovel ready, it allows then nonprofit housing providers and developers to be able to just move forward more quickly to be able to actually put shovels in the ground. I don't know if there's anything further with respect to that particular piece.
Just before we move on, any questions from community members or other staff? No? I know, Randy, we're doing a housekeeping with regards to our zoning. You're probably aware of with regards to secondary units and trying to make it more streamlined. So.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Mr. Chair, a question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Councilor Burley.
I guess I'll sort of read back to Randy. I'm just curious. Great County has a new transportation plan, a route system all put in place throughout the Great County in different areas. Is there any appetite to get that involved with surrounding municipalities that aren't on full services? I'm thinking municipal water is fine, but not being to sewer systems. So on, would it be possible to take advantage of so many vacant properties inside of hamlet areas?
Randy?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, if they're within settlement areas, so they don't have to be, like, we support housing and the creation of lots and other units within settlement areas in our current county official plan, and they don't have to be fully serviced, right? So there are definitely some hamlets that don't have full services. The density that is usually a challenge, right, in terms of what density can be considered or supported on private services is usually the limiting factor in terms of what can go in those areas. But no doubt there's maybe some opportunities for some infill development, maybe a slightly higher density, but unfortunately we just can't get to the densities that we would normally see in fully serviced settlement areas where we think that we'll be able to get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, in terms of higher densities through rental apartment housing types, etc., in our fully serviced settlement areas. So that's why our initial focus on the land bank is looking at the vacant lands within our fully serviced settlement areas. But we're also looking at other settlement areas just to make sure that there may be the odd, like I said, pocket here and there that could support some form of housing just at a lower density.
Randy?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Kim. Go ahead.
Randy, can you just make a comment too about, from a zoning perspective, about parking requirements?
Yeah, so parking requirements are just another thing that is similar to our minimum housing size is that we have had historically in our zoning bylaws. They are often things that we just don't don't really review in full detail. And so they create these legacy issues of, well, why did we create those anyways? Or why are our parking standards requiring so many spaces for a development when we're seeing maybe a change in how and what our parking requirements actually are on the ground. So for sure, when we're doing our zoning bylaw updates, I think it's important to also look at our parking standards and requirements just to make sure that they're in line with what we're actually experiencing on the ground. And as we get into more transit opportunities and things like that, hopefully we'll see actually the need for more parking spaces being reduced further. Things like also car sharing programs. And if we get into stuff like that, again, that also helps to drive down the need for more parking spaces or more, just paved parking areas that in some cases are just sitting vacant and not fully utilized. So it's definitely, because those add costs to the overall development project. So it's important to make sure that our parking standards are in line with what we're actually seeing in terms of parking requirements, so to speak.
If there's simply not enough footprint there on the site, the parking can become just a showstopper. And I don't know that there's always the conversation. If it was a choice between having 5 less parking spots and having a development at all, what would people like to see?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually included some policies in our in Recolor Gray that speaks to being able to look for kind of shared parking facilities, right? So as Kim described, if there's a particular property that just doesn't have enough parking, are there parking opportunities nearby? Is there like a missile parking lot, or is there another parking lot that is not being fully utilized? Could they enter into an agreement to be able to address the parking requirements that are required for that build? So opportunities like that, I think, are worth exploring, because as I said, that it helps to lower the overall development costs and make a site actually viable in order to address the parking requirements.
Okay, yeah, parking is very, very important when it comes to, especially sometimes there's a lot of guests.
Yes.
Okay, carry on there, Randy, then.
Yep. So the next slide is Durham Lands, and Chair McQueen, you mentioned this in terms of being a potential opportunity for housing options. So in 2020, last year, the county acquired over 30 acres of land in the settlement area of Durham. And the lands are shown on the map on the screen. These lands will support, of course, the future rebuild of Rockwood Terrace long-term care home. However, we anticipate the new long-term care home will only require approximately 4 to 6 acres of that site. The remaining lands can then be used for other housing options. The county has retained a consultant to explore those housing options that would complement the new long-term care home. The consultants will also assess the capital and estimated long-term operating requirements for the various housing models as well. So the various housing options could include a mixture of affordable, attainable, and market rate housing. And we anticipate the consultant's report to be completed this spring. So that is something that, again, we can bring back to the next task force meeting as another discussion to say, here's some housing options that are being recommended as part of the consultant's report, and then explore that further in terms of what opportunities can happen within the lands that we've acquired in Durham. So if there's no questions on that one, there's the next one is the Climate Change Action Plan. And the county is currently developing a climate change action plan with the assistance of ICLEI Canada. And as part of that action plan, there may be a number of strategies and actions that could further support and promote things like innovative building design, as well as energy efficient design. In discussions with groups like Habitat for Humanity, they've noted in the past that the cost of buying or renting a dwelling it's only a portion of the story. And the actual carrying costs of the house also need to be considered in order for people to be able to maintain their housing that they currently reside in. Some examples of recommended climate change strategies and actions could include things like energy efficiency, education and awareness programs, to be able to reduce people's energy costs within their homes, energy efficient retrofit programs, green standards for new buildings. So coming up with a kind of an enhanced almost building code that supports green standards to be able to, again, reduce overall energy costs, as well as supporting renewable energy such as solar to help reduce overall energy costs. We anticipate that a draft climate change action plan will be finalized this spring as well. And now I'll turn it over to Anne-Marie. If there's no further questions, she can is going to provide an update in terms of where we think future action items and next steps, where we go and go through the updated housing action plan that was attached to the report.
Thanks, Randy. So just as our future actions and our next steps, we know that we need to implement the Affordable Housing Fund. We have the fund itself, but we do need to set some criteria around how the fund is used, how many funds, who accesses it. So that needs to probably come back to this task force too in a couple of months once we find out what some of the criteria might be from the province too. We do have their existing criteria, but in case there are some changes, because there was the last time, just to find out what that might look like as to how to access the fund. Randy mentioned about finalizing the land bank criteria and bringing that back to this task force also. Offering surplus lands to nonprofit housing providers first and then private developers. So looking at what that process would be, we do have an RFP that we did use and a process we have used in the past. So again, just looking at that and making sure that that process would be appropriate. As Randy mentioned, updating OP5 policies and zoning for our official plan, investigating options that might be out there for landlord and tenant matchmaking. There are community agencies in other areas that are doing some programming around that. Working with our local municipalities to promote our community improvement incentives and development charges exemptions referrals. Let's get Randy to pass to the next one. We're going to continue to monitor the community improvement programs. Explore any partnerships that might be out there for addressing some housing related to labor shortages. And again, what those partnerships and what the county's role might be in that. Finalizing and implementing the housing option study for the Durham Lands. Continuing to promote and educate on the need and importance of affordable and attainable housing. I know that we're often asked to speak with various groups. So continuing to provide that information as needed to the public. And obviously providing progress updates to our task force here regarding the housing action plan. So we do have a recommendation. Randy, did you want to take that one?
For sure. So the recommendation we have is that the task force receives the actions and initiatives in the report that are outlined, and that the recommend that council endorse the housing action plan that's attached to this report, and to direct staff to implement those next steps and actions that will assist with creating more affordable and attainable housing. And as Anne-Marie noted, if supported, we'll obviously be moving forward with those action items, and we'll be coming back to this task force with some further progress updates in terms of where we're at with some of these things. We'd be happy to take any questions the task force may have.
Okay, well, thanks, Anne-Marie, and thanks, Randy, for that. Are there any further questions to the recommendations that are being brought forward here today? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Anne-Marie, can you just, I just want a better understanding that the people that have, that are spending more than 30% on rent are eligible for subsidy, correct?
The people that are spending more than 30% would be eligible for subsidy?
Right.
Yes, so the housing that we're building would be so that people do not have to spend that. So it's based on their income rather than what they're actually spending for housing right now.
Right, so is there a list of people that are eligible for subsidy that aren't getting it, or are we covering all that?
So that would be our housing wait list that we have. So if people want rent geared to income housing, which is 30% of their income, they would get onto our list. If they want to move in with us, if they're looking for a rent supplement in the community, they would also be on our wait list for that. So we do not have enough funds to provide that. We spend, I believe we have about 70 or 80 rent supplements that we do fund right now.
So now that we've added the 1%, can that be changed at all?
That 1% will go towards helping build, because we know that without the 1% plus the provincial funds, an affordable housing build would not be viable. But we could certainly look at using some of those funds for a rent supplement also. They are long-term, and it is something, we did receive some money from the province for this year. So there will be a report coming to council on what that'll look like. But certainly these funds can be used for a rent supplement, but we do have a wait list for that now too.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And just before I go on to the warden, welcome Councillor Soever. I see you have joined us.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for being late, but we had a community recovery task force meeting that ran late. We have some issues on some of our seniors being able to sign up for the vaccination, so it did delay me a bit.
Okay, well, we're glad that you're able to join us. We're just at the recommendation stage that was on our published agenda. So I'm going to go to the warden. I don't know where he went. He was on my screen.
Yeah, we seem to have lost the warden right now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I don't know, Councillor Schwarber, if you have any questions. We both through staff, Anne-Marie and Randy have done a sort of a slide presentation with regards to the report that was in our agenda. Sort of summarized a number of points that was captured in that report. Just while you're maybe gathering your thoughts there, Councillor Schwarber. So Anne-Marie, you and I were at the Poverty Task Force there last Friday, and you did a great job presenting Grey County's position and what we have done. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I think we were certainly quite pleased. And I don't know if you have any comments with regards to that meeting.
Certainly. The Poverty Task Force, again, was very excited that council has chosen to commit 1% levy each year towards affordable housing. Definitely great progress, great recognition, and I think very happy that there's a supportive council that's looking towards providing housing for our most vulnerable people. So lots of kudos at the meeting.
Yeah, there certainly were, and very well received. Mr. Warden, I see you're back. I think you had indicated maybe you went for ice cream, maybe, I'm not sure, but welcome back. And you have the floor if you have a follow-up question.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. You would think in London, Ontario, I would have the finest broadband connection, but apparently I do not. So I apologize. My internet went down and I had to leave and come back. I wanted to raise, I can't remember if it was at this body or whether it was the Hanover Owen Sound task force, where the issue, we discussed the issue at some point about making connections with known landlords. So for example, there are a certain base of apartment owners. They're known, they're few in numbers, and expanding that to also known developers, people who have a history of having interest in developments that might be up our alley. I don't know what, if anything else, we've done with that, but I don't see it in the recommendations. And I wonder if we wouldn't maybe go back to that, because I think it is a very good idea to maybe, I don't know, begin some kind of engagement with these people, let them know what our plans are, find out what their needs might be, what would interest them, what's important to them. Any thoughts on that, Randy?
Randy?
Very good point. And I just did a quick scan of the housing action plan, and that was left off by accident. So yes, I think we should, if this task force is supportive of it, obviously, is to recommend that be added as an additional action item, because that was missed. And that is something that we are still working towards. We have definitely identified through through some data analysis in terms of who has a number of our housing units, specifically in Hanover and Owen Sound, but we have the ability to look at other settlement areas based on the same method that we use for the Hanover and Owen Sound Task Force. So I think that would be very beneficial to explore, because we want to have those conversations with those folks that are already landlords for a number of our apartment buildings within our communities, to see if there's opportunities again to maybe expand those opportunities and rental builds in other areas. So they will be a key group to engage, especially when it comes to things like our incentive programs that we've highlighted as well. So making them aware that those are now available and an opportunity. I know some are already aware of them, and some are actually on the kind of the wait list to get this conditional agreement that staff are currently working on to be able to move forward with rental apartment builds. So I think, but it'll be important to continue those discussions with those key groups that currently operate a number of apartments within our communities.
Thanks, Randy. Any follow-up, Mr. Warden?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Next I have Councillor Sweber and then Councillor Keaveney after that. Go ahead, Councillor Sweber.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank staff for this excellent report and apologize for being late, but I did have a chance to review it over the last few days. And I think it's a very good report. Just want to highlight some of the things that stood out. One was the demographic that it's targeted to. It's great that we're clearing the wait list. We've had a lot of discussion in our community about the demographic we're trying to serve with the attainable housing. People say, well, why aren't you serving the lower income people rather than the middle? And we do point out that county is already doing that. And, that through our county taxes, we do, contribute to that as well. And so, 30% of a person's income, it covers quite a broad range when we know that there are some apartments here that are going for $2,500 a month. So, it is great that we're serving that, all demographics through both this program and the program here at the local level. In terms of the housing land bank, we didn't have much of a land bank in the town of Blue Mountains, but we did buy 36 acres on the western edge of town very recently. It was a significant investment, but then again, when you look at the cost per acre and what other properties we're going for, I think we got a very good deal. So I urge Randy to reach out. That land, 36 acres is a lot of land in one place, and it is right in the edge of our settlement. Well, it's just outside the current immediately the next plan for development. So it is good, and it's right at the junction of County Road 119 and 113, and 26. So there's that. We do have our community improvement plan. Finally, we got that in place, and I want to thank the county for its contribution toward that and through the supplementaries. I think it's a really good report. One of the things that we have discussed extensively here is green initiatives. We've looked at them. We've got a grant actually to look at green initiatives. When we do start looking at them for buildings, there's the balance between making a building attainable and green. I mean, you'd want to do, the gold standard in everything, but as the gold standard applies, it does come with a cost. Now, some things you save on operating costs. So, when you look at the capital investment is worth it. But then there's other things which would be great to have, but on the other hand, would be a huge financial cost. And then you have to weigh is how many units do I want to give up to, have a very small incremental increase in being green. So that we have looked at in our own attainable housing project is, balancing off, keeping the project attainable and getting the gold or platinum standard in, the latest green technologies. So those are the only things that I'd like to highlight in the report. I thought of reading it, but I want to thank the staff for the excellent job they've done in addressing a lot of these issues.
Well, thank you, Councillor Swiver, and make sure you put your hand, take your hand down there. Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Randy, if I may. Thinking about existing affordable units, those in particular owned by nonprofits, and is there opportunity through what we're doing here to offer them incentives for, say, renovations or green projects? Or I'm thinking of one locally where they're offering very affordable rents, can't increase their rents, but like other communities, our water and wastewater rates have had to increase substantially, and that's putting an impact on the not-for-profit club. And is there any way through what we're talking about here today to support those nonprofits that are already providing housing?
So Randy or Emery?
Yeah, through you, Chair McQueen, I'll start, and then I think Anne-Marie can highlight some either existing programs or future programs that could be available through some funding. One that for sure I think will be part of the discussion through the Climate Change Action Plan to see what opportunities may be available to support exactly what you've described, Councillor Keaveney. So that's something that we can definitely explore further in terms of energy retrofit programs. Just even education and awareness in terms of what, going back to Councillor Swiver's points, in terms of what upgrades or retrofits are cost effective and that are quick fixes that don't cost a whole lot, but will actually reduce quite a bit of your energy costs. Things like that we want to really focus, not only from nonprofit housing providers, but also just overall homeowners throughout our communities to be able to lower their energy costs so that they can maintain their housing. So those are some things that we definitely want to explore. And I mentioned too the kind of the green building program. A number of communities like Halton Region and others, they've developed kind of a green building standards that go above and beyond the building code. But again, going back to Councillor Swiver, they need to be balanced, right? You can't have the gold standard all the time because that's just going to add more costs. But there are definitely some green standards and energy efficiencies that don't cost a whole lot, but really make a difference over the long term. So those are the ones that we really want to explore further with local municipal staff through chief building officials. What can we promote and support through some programs when folks are coming to our counter and asking for a building permit, pointing them to some small upgrades in their build that will actually make a huge difference for their energy costs going forward. So Anne-Marie, I don't know if you have any further programs that exist in terms of energy retrofits and stuff.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair, there's a few programs through utility companies too that they might have that they'd be able to access. LED lighting programs, there's certainly one that's out there right now. There were some programs provincially that no longer exist that hopefully maybe at some time might be brought back. And for our own nonprofits that we support through Grey County, we have 9. There was a social housing apartment improvement program that was about 4 years ago also that did have some capital funds available for retrofits. So certainly our nonprofits take advantage of those programs when they come available. But right now, I believe the only existing ones are through utility companies.
Okay. Any follow-up to that, Councillor Keaveney? Do you have any other comments?
No, I'm fine. I thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
If I may?
Yeah, go ahead, Madam CEO.
The only other piece of this is the potential, I think, for further education, awareness, and trying to build buy-in. I mean, we've all seen it. The tenant's not paying the heat and the window's wide open and it's January. Or you're not paying for the water so you can let the tap run. Things like that. And if there's a way to help people to, I don't know, get on board with, I don't know, trying to be conscious of their energy use, if there could be something in it for them, if you will, that, you know, the savings that you get on the ownership of the building, the operating of the building, somehow in some portion come back to further amenities in the space or something like that. I don't know, but I do think there's maybe some opportunities there as well.
And maybe that gets improved, MCO, with newer heat systems, because I know people say, I can't turn the heat down and it's so hot in here and I got to open the window up.
Exactly. That's that's a very valid point. There's good reasons for that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Okay, other questions? So just for refreshment, this was moved by Councillor Burley, second by Councillor O'Leary of the report. And sorry, Madam Clerk.
I think it's important, thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to Warden Hicks's comment about adding the engagement piece, because the plan is going to go to council for endorsement, I think it's important to add that into the resolution. So Kathy has drafted an amendment that the main motion be amended to add engaging with known landlords and developers to the updated housing action plan. So I think that's important to add in there so that the full picture is contained within the minutes. So you'd need a mover and seconder for the amendment, and then we'll go back and vote on the main motion as amended.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Warden, were you willing to move that amendment? Okay, do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Burley, do we have any discussion on the amendment to the main motion? Mr. Warden.
I would just say, I think we need the amendment, but I would also say it appears to be partially covered, at least, in the summary at the end of the staff report, where it talks about public and private partnerships. Perhaps that's talking about, you know, something else. I think this is about, the amendment is about engagement, but I think hopefully it leads to public-private partnerships.
But it certainly highlights that part for sure in this amendment.
Yeah,
Randy, go ahead.
Through you, Chair McQueen, I think that's where we would add some further detail just to clarify that that's, it would be within that category for sure.
Yeah, engagement, I think, is a great word. Yeah,
totally.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? I hear none. All in favor of the amendment? I guess anybody opposed to the amendment? I guess everybody, all in favor? Okay, I think I got everybody there. Sorry, Madam Clerk, I sort of got you there throwing it.
That's okay. You could see everyone, so you could do all of them.
Yeah. I know with having a council meeting, we vote because we can see everybody, right? So sorry about that. Mr. Ward, did you have a question or you were just verifying your vote? Okay, so now we have our main motion that's been amended. Any further questions to that main motion? Just a question I have for you, Anne Marie, and maybe Randy and other staff. Since this is sort of a big deal of what Grey County has done, do you suppose that we could reach out to our provincial and federal government representatives, or is there any opportunity to get an opportunity to create a special project that we could get extra funding just because it's a big deal with this and what we're doing? Is there any? Do you think there would be any interest on sourcing something out from that other levels of government? Anne-Marie?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So I think it is a big deal. It's great what we're doing. And I think this puts us in a great position that if there are ever funds available at the end of the year, we would have a project we could put our hands up and say, pick us. That's how we did get more funding for our Ottawa Heights. There are 46 other service managers that are also looking at funding for affordable housing. But if you can make sure that you're a little bit ahead of the game and ready with shovel-ready projects, then if there are funds that are not used, then you're in a good position to get those. And we have been fortunate on 2 occasions to have that funding already. You know, as long as we keep our contacts at the provincial level aware that we've got projects ready to go, they do reach out. So I think they're grateful that they have someone they can turn to at the end of the year that can get the funds out.
Okay, well, thanks for that. And it's as us politicians, it's always our duty to always keep pushing that envelope a little bit as well. I got Councillor Sweber and then the word. Go ahead. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would suggest that it would be great that we do reach out to our federal and provincial counterparts. And I would like to remind everybody that oftentimes we do not reach out to the our MP and MPP that serve this part of the county. You know, Terry Dowdle is our MP and Jim Wilson is our MPP. And, you know, I would encourage that we include them as well. A lot of times, I think they're feeling a bit neglected now in that they haven't been contacted by Grey County recently.
Okay, that's a point well taken, for sure. Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a good point made by Councillor Soever, and we'll try to address that. I was going to say, actually, on the Bruce Grey Owen Sound side of things, there's been very good dialogue. I meet with those individuals weekly, sometimes twice a week, and we do have quarterly meetings set. So I will put this item on the next quarterly meeting with those individuals, and perhaps Kim and I will talk offline about how we can build the relationship in the same way on the east side of the boundary.
That's good. That's very good. I know I'll keep my ear to the table at the AMO portion that I am connected with as well. And I was always thinking that there's opportunities, and sometimes you gotta seek those opportunities to make them happen, and you always gotta be an advocate. So is there any further discussion?
Even if they know, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm interrupting you. I think even if they just know that, you know, we've got this plan, they've been hearing some stuff in the media, but I think it is important, as Councillor Soever suggests, to make sure that they're aware, maybe they dive a little bit deeper with them about what we're trying to do. And if they can just keep us in mind, if there are opportunities that come up, that they at least know this is the plan moving forward. And we just want them to be on board with it. Allies.
Yes, communication is always good. And just another comment is, you know, there is this idea of a federal election out there somewhere. Sometimes funds appear, opportunities appear, you know, so we always got to make sure we're always ready. And as Anne-Marie explained, you're always looking for those opportunities for sure. No last comments then on the motion that's on the floor. How about all in favor? All those in favor? All in favor? That's carried. Very good. Is there any other business then? I see on the agenda there's a spot for other business. Is there any other business then that was to be addressed? So just, I guess, the next steps then, I guess, for you, Randy, or Madam CEO, then you were looking at there was a couple of reasons to coming back in the future. So we'll be looking at maybe like May type thing. There will be that report that comes back, I guess, at some time in the spring. I guess we'll leave it up to staff to determine when that time will be to call that meeting. And
yeah, I think I had in my mind maybe closer to July.
Okay.
But in that time frame, well, when we've got substantive feedback, we'll make sure that we get something set up right away.
Yep.
And certainly if Anne-Marie comes across a situation where there's a great opportunity, we need to call a meeting. We'll certainly need that. We can certainly do that, right? I'm always hopeful thinking, right? Okay, well then that's seeing that. Then do you have a motion then to adjourn then? Moved by Councillor O'Leary, second by, do we need a seconder? Councillor Soever. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, and that's, I'm going to say that's 11:35. So have a good day, everyone. Stay safe, and spring is on its way.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.